The next item on the agenda is the resident survey, 2020-2021 update. Peter Ryan, Head of Performance Management, and I'll open it up for questions. Yanni, you had a question.
Thank you. I mean, I think we've discussed a lot of this at the Finance and Performance Committee as well. I guess what I'm really interested though is in the metrics around the public understanding how decisions are made, how they have influence on our decision making, and also the responsiveness which still seems to come up, you know, in terms of complaints. So yeah, at a high level, I just wondered if anyone could sort of explain what thoughts were given to improving those metrics.
Do you mean improving the result or the metric? Because the metric is pretty straightforward. It basically asks people how they feel about those any service, including decision making.
Yeah, so it's.
I'm not sure that we can make the measurement better. Are you driving at the result?
Yeah, so it's basically there's the transport issues which seems to come up pretty strongly, and then there's the if you look at the results around you know, community input basically. So you know, there's a number of things there, increasing transparency, improving communication, etc. So
just so I understand,
Peter's asked you, are you asking about the results or are you asking about the metrics? How we
improve the results. Like what thoughts been given to how we improve the results.
No, but that's not the purpose of this report. That's not for Peter actually. It's the purpose of our consideration of a number of issues, including our long-term plan and how we approach various issues. But it's really for the chief executive and for us to.
Can I ask a question of the chief executive? If you take governance.
No. Sorry, this is the resident survey update. So right. We're talking about the the metrics with Peter at the table. So I'm a little unclear as to where you're going, Yanni.
Sorry, so page 94, for example, where we've got a big red thing around governance and decision making. You know, I guess it's really a question around, we have the local governance statement, but we haven't endorsed it at a governance level. So I'm just a bit confused about what's the process to respond to these results for us at a governance level around things that relate to governance.
Maybe a little context would help here. All councils in New Zealand have broadly similar or much lower scores than Christchurch does in this respect. I'm not going to name names, but even some of the very large metros have difficult results in this place. And central government departments, of course, don't do this at all. So it's very difficult to benchmark and understand what a good score is when central government doesn't survey itself at all, and the councils that do have broadly similar results. What I'm trying to say is it's very difficult to score highly in that particular space. Now that doesn't mean we can't improve, and I'm not really sure I have an off-the-hip response on how to change that result, given that it's such a broad issue. But I do want to put it in context of how that number looks compared to the rest of the country and in fact the world.
So rather than the individual element, you're absolutely right. It's no good just receiving the resident survey and then just doing nothing about it. So clearly we have the specific detail, and there are a number of avenues that we need to do organisationally and together, officer and members. And fundamentally, we know that the key issues that have come through in this resident survey have been the underpinning, because they came through in last year, of the work that we have put into the proposals into the LTP. But there are wider implications that me and my management team will be working through these in detail, and we will be looking at how do we improve our performance and how do we drive continuous improvement across the organisation. So I don't have a specific answer today for you, Yanni, in terms of an individual element, but I can assure you that this will be the bedrock of not the only thing, because there are other factors, not just the resident survey, which is appointed time, which we as a management team are taking extremely seriously.
But that still doesn't come, well, in terms of page 95, the governance and decision making, we're trending down, so we're trending in the wrong direction, although one's had a slight increase. But that still doesn't address at a governance level. How do we address that? I thought we would do that through local governance statement, but that's not something that we've signed off on. So is there other processes that we can consider those results? I mean, you know, again, like we've had a number of submitters through the LTP complain about the access to the information, and I guess we'll review the LTP process like a continuous improvement. But you know, I do think we should actually think about what's on that page in terms of 95 at a governance level, and what it is that we can be doing to try and improve those results.
I think that's for the Mayor to comment in terms of the governance piece.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we've been through the governance process before. It's been a report that we've received in the past. I mean, I went back and after you raised it, I think, I can't remember which time it was you raised it, but we went back and had a look, and each time it was just a noting paper that was brought to council. On each occasion, it's signed off by the management of the organisation, and it is simply noted at a meeting of the council. So the council laws don't have anything other than reading it. So that's I mean, I don't know what you're trying to get at. I think that when you look at the satisfaction survey and the tracking of results, I mean, obviously it seems to me that the one thing that it doesn't tell you is what motivates people to have this view that they have some influence on the decision the council makes. So, I mean, I just wonder whether it's worth doing a little bit of qualitative analysis of residents' views rather than just the quantitative, because the quantitative really doesn't give us the in-depth analysis, because there are things that have changed on here. So lead the promotion and marketing of Christchurch events and the city as an events destination. I mean, that's probably not a, you know, sort of a major in terms of how good people feel about their city, but that's a reduction from 90% in 2012 to 66% today. So it's a significant reduction, but what does it actually mean?
I might be able to help here, and I may be able to address Yanni's concerns a bit more.
Yeah.
This is just the top line report. Underneath this, there are thousands of lines of data, but also a lot of qualitative feedback. Now, just very briefly on the council decision making, even within this report, the root causes of the result you've got don't need to be guessed at. They're quite clear there about consultation, maybe looking at a better rate system, communication and monitoring. There are themes there which are also underpinned by lots of comments and feedback that you could tease out and look at and say, well, they're the areas to focus on, and that's what staff do with the services that staff deliver. So it's actually probably no different at a governance level to tease out what is underneath those numbers and look at how we can address that. But the data is there, and the comments and the qualitative feedback are there. They're not in this report in the interests of time, but the detail is there.
So what I'm just would it be helpful then for councillors perhaps to workshop the qualitative data that sits beneath the high level results of the surveys, and seek further guidance as to where that might where we might be able to address some of those concerns.
I think that'd be very helpful. It's very similar to what staff do with services that staff deliver, and notably, I just want to reinforce Dawn's point about the LTP. You'll remember that we've increased roading from 2% renewals to 5%.
Yeah.
That was a direct response to the feedback in last year's resident survey.
Yeah.
Now, it hasn't taken effect yet, but the response is there, and that's the same process of dig into the data, figure out what the concern is, the concern wasn't the road network, it was actually potholes and speed of repair and the responses in the LTP. So that's a sort of an example of the loop.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to say it would be really good to have a workshop with regards to, say, the councillors, because we can't keep talking about council as, you know, it's up for us and our community boards to go out. So I think it'd be really good in that, sorry? To talk in that workshop, because I know Melanie, my colleague, will be able to. We go out quite a lot as a community board. We have our meetings in local schools, etc. So we're trying to break down that barrier, if you like, of them and us, and that's our community. We work for them, so we spend a lot of time. And I know some of us personally go out and hold regular meetings in places. So it is actually up to us. We can do a lot. So I think we should look at that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, Peter, you said before about the results of other councils similar to ours in their survey with the dissatisfaction, but when you look on page 86, where you see the overall satisfaction of service delivery and the drop-off over the last 10, 12, 13 years, are the councils all dropping off as well? Collectively, councils becoming more and more unpopular? I know they are for the government, but...
Sorry, just to clarify, the comment about other councils was specific to the
governance.
The governance
Right.
result, about governance decision-making. It wasn't the overall survey. But it's fair to say that, broadly speaking, because there are a million surveys floating around, that government does struggle to get high results in surveys.
Well, this council used to regularly be almost on 80, 79, 79, 78, 79,
Yes.
77.
And again, I'd say that you need to go back to the underlying root causes and the qualitative feedback to figure out what that means, rather than just seeing the big number at face value. Because people's reasons for being satisfied or dissatisfied change over time. So the reasons they might have been happy or unhappy in 2009 could be different today. So you need to drill in and tease it apart.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, are other councils on a similar track, or is it unique to Christchurch?
I think it'd be smarter than answering that off the hip would be to actually go and dig up the data and compare them, but remembering that they may survey differently, so you're comparing apples with oranges. But broadly speaking, local government is struggling around the world to maintain its level of satisfaction. I think it's a fair generalisation.
Right, okay.
And we don't know what would happen with central government in that space, because they don't do this at all. They don't seek feedback at all.
Just every 3 years. Yeah.
Of that democratic feedback.
Yeah, but they always know better, so that's why they don't need to.
Just trying to get some wording for an additional recommendation, which is really to staff to conduct a workshop with councillors for an initial consideration of the of an improvement process for the governance survey results with after the LTP. So I'm going to say after the LTP, and I heard you say good because there's
only so many
there's a
hours
good
in a
reason
day.
for that.
Yeah.
But once the LTP's through, we'll set aside some time for a decent workshop just to do some analysis of that, and then to look at where we can develop an improvement process. Because I agree with Tim, a lot of this is about how not what we do in here, it's what we do out in the community, and it's that face-to-face, when the Hereward Waimaori Pendleton Community Board went out and took the LTP out to the supermarkets and places like that, the feeling of engagement was much, much higher. So, it is what we can do ourselves that is a considerable contribution. Sometimes asking for reports isn't necessarily the way to go. We need to own this and find a pathway to improvement. Yeah.
If I might make just a couple of quick observations, it's very easy to maybe miscast what the survey is. It is about services. It's not about Christchurch as a whole or people or who happens to be working in this building so much. It is very specific to the services we offer. And it doesn't, there are limits to what these things can tell you. Like, for example, because it's services, it won't tell you how successfully Christchurch performed in this rainfall event, because it's an annual survey. So you do need to just keep in mind that what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, but I also think that sometimes, because I have read some of the background comments that people make, you know, in different surveys that have come through over the years, and sometimes there's a complete disconnect from what we actually do and what they think we do,
Yeah.
and what we can influence and what people think we can influence. So sometimes that affects how people are feeling about an issue.
It does, and also some of the feedback is contradictory. For example, waste management, the bins, is their favourite, but also to some extent not their favourite at the same time.
Yeah.
So you really need to see it in balance with how we perform objectively as well, in the scientific sense, not just subjective sense.
Yeah. Can you call that a governance workshop on the resident survey, because it's very much focused on the sense of contribution to decision making, all of the governance issues.
Yep.
And
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Just looking at the 6,133 respondents, do we do an analysis? I mean, obviously we do. We obviously identify gaps in terms of who we are talking with or not talking with, and how do we modify our approach going forward if we're not hearing from certain, parts of the community that we need to hear from?
It's a really good question. Look, in summary, there's a whole science beneath this, but some groups are growing increasingly difficult to get involved in this kind of stuff. I mean, this is the general satisfaction survey is 25 minutes, which is just about at the upper limit of what most people are prepared to actually do these days. Volunteerism is down, civic focus is not what it once was, so it is hard to get certain groups to be involved. Now, there is a focus on that for going forward for next year, both in terms of demographics, diversity, maybe having to go and do some of this in person, because whatever channel you use, whether it's email or phone or whatever, there are certain people who are not necessarily evenly distributed on that channel. So we may have to make some adjustments to how we do this to capture youth and other groups that may not respond to a traditional approach. And we know that, we're working on it. It takes time, but it also adds complexity to the survey, which is one of the things that repels some people in the first place. So it's a bit of a catch-22, yeah.
Jimmy?
Thank you. Yeah. Two questions. I'm not sure, because the feedback, the two categories. One is they thought that the council provided kind of good quality to improvement. The other one need most improvement. However, this survey is a separate two category. But general service is most of the service, residents, they experience those one. You particularly mentioned the routing issue and water supply issue. However, the point of contact survey is a particular specific item, like whether your impression regarding local library, etc. So I just don't know, your feedback, these two, the feedback is combined those two survey, 6,100 people together or just separate? Because usually I thought, if they experience a specific one, they might have a more subjective response. Am I right? It's not just overall. So I just don't know this feedback. It's too.
No, if you look at the appendices, you'll see that the results are separate from the two separate surveys. They can't really be smushed together in any meaningful way to create one result. Basically, we expect that people who live in the city understand the roads, because everyone gets around and moves, but they may not understand the process of a building consent or a specific service. And so for things that everybody receives, that's the general survey. for things that are specific. There's no point asking an elderly grandmother about a building consent when she's not had one for 40 years. So we go to the people who've just done a building consent, tap them on the shoulder and say, how is that for you? So that's two different groups for two different purposes, and we keep the results separate. So you'll see that there is a point of contact survey result attached and the general survey result are attached. You can't really amalgamate them in any meaningful way. They're different tools for a different purpose.
Implication between those two feedback, because one are the area the council deliver based, is the waste management, 29% favor. But the same, the feedback, the area need the most improvement. Also the top four, waste management, 6%. So
Yes.
I just don't know what's the implication.
That's actually pretty easy to explain. The waste service is very, very popular. People love the bin system, but on a very specific thing around recycling and the size of the bin, they're less happy.
Yes.
So they like the service, but they have quibbles about the recycling and the bin size.
Yes.
And those two things are not actually opposite. They like the overall, but they
Yes.
are giving us specific feedback about a specific thing.
Okay.
So they're not contradictory, they're just, they're differentiating and making a distinction.
Okay.
Does
Okay,
that
thank you.
make sense?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right, so, sorry, did you have another question?
Happy to move.
Happy to move? Seconded by Pauline. Any discussion? Aaron?
Yeah, I was happy to move this because this is an incredibly important document for the council, and I think we should take a strong warning from it. When you look at those numbers, as a council, we should be striving to be up around that 80% all the time. If you're in business, if you run a sports team, if you run the rugby union, or you run a TV channel, and you take your numbers from 79, 80% satisfactory down to 49, you should be taking a huge look at yourself and your entire organisation. This here is fantastic to be arriving just before we do the LTP because it's called reading the room. Our city is not happy with the way that this organisation operates, and we need to listen to this and try and work to getting outcomes for our city that work for our city, because that is an unacceptable result for any elected member ever in the history of the city. We have to do better. And it doesn't matter, you can look at them individually, break it down, do whatever you want, but as a city we must perform better. 49% satisfaction, because this is a great place to live. Christchurch is a fantastic city with a lot of opportunity, but at the moment our GDP's it's the last of all the main centres. We're underperforming as a city, and we have to lift our game, and we all need to take a good long hard look at ourselves and work with Dawn and her team to get better results than this.
Anyone else? All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.